20 Indian soldiers have been killed fighting with Chinese troops.
India has announced plans to ban 54 Chinese
Anti-China
apps.
sentiment across India has seen protests since.
In the wake of the Pahalgam terror attack, China has voiced support for Pakistan.
In addition to an officer and 2 soldiers who had died earlier.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jaishankar has just dropped a bombshell that is turning the Cold War between India and China into an unexpected friendship.
Differences must not become disputes, nor competition conflict. We must be guided by the 3 mutuals: mutual respect, mutual sensitivity, and mutual interest.
And all thanks to Donald Trump, economics says that this could perhaps be the most powerful alliance of the 21st century.
Donald Trump has slapped massive import taxes on India, up to 50%.
Narendra Modi saying he will not compromise despite Donald Trump's plan to hike levies on Indian goods.
Just a few years ago, Indian and Chinese soldiers were killing each other at the borders. China was invading Indian territories and India hit back with massive tariffs and bans.
The Modi government is trying to raise import duties on at least 300 items being imported from China, and is also trying to put other barriers on Chinese businesses.
But suddenly, after Donald Trump's tariffs, India and China are coming back together.
The setbacks we experienced in the past few years were not in the interests of the people of our 2 countries.
China is set to resume the much-needed supply of fertilizers, rare earth minerals, and tunnel boring machines to India. This comes as India and China move towards a normalization of ties.
And most importantly, Modiji is now about to visit China after 7 long years.
Trump's tariffs pushing the 2 Asian giants closer together. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be making his first visit to China in 7 years and meet with President Xi Jinping.
So the question is, are we witnessing an unthinkable shift in the alliance between India and China? Why are India and China suddenly getting close to each other? Can India really afford to go against the US and side with China? And most importantly, if India and China actually come together, could they really build the most powerful alliance of the 21st century? Watch this episode carefully, because what you're about to listen to is a classic tussle between economics and geopolitics. But before we dive into today's case study, I want to thank Incred Money, the platform that helps you explore opportunities in the unlisted shares before companies go public. Think about it. Every big listed company today, whether that's Infosys or Zomato, they were once unlisted companies. So early investors often had the chance to get in before these companies hit the stock market. And for that matter today, even NSE shares are unlisted. And that is where Incred Money comes in. Incred Money helps you access these unlisted shares before these companies go IPO. And they make this process absolutely simple. They charge 0 brokerage, so you don't lose money on fees. You can start with as little as 200 rupees. And they even have advisors that you can book a call with to understand the process better. And if you sign up using the link in the description, you also get 250 rupees cash back on your first investment. Now please remember, investing in unlisted shares has its own risks. Lower liquidity, a 6-month lock-in after listing, and price swings. So always do your research, talk to experts, and invest wisely. And if this is very, very clear to you, check out Incred Money with the link below to learn more about unlisted shares and see if it fits your investment journey. Disclaimer, I am not a SEBI registered investment advisor and this isn't financial advice. So please consult a professional before investing. If this is clear, let's move on to our episode. You know, when Donald Trump imposed tariffs on India, he stated that he is punishing India to side with Russia and fund Russia via trade to fight against Ukraine. Look at this. From December 2022 till June 2025, 38% of Russia's crude oil exports came to India. But 47% of Russia's oil exports went to China. So if Trump's concern was genuinely about Russian oil purchases, logic dictates that China should face the harshest penalties, isn't it? And what's even more shocking is that in the same period, the European Union was the largest buyer of LNG and pipeline gas from Russia. They purchased 51% of Russia's LNG exports and 37% of their pipeline gas. And in 2024, America imported $3 billion of goods from Russia, which included fertilizers, palladium, and enriched uranium. So what exactly does Donald Trump want? When I read through several reports, articles, and statements from the American officials, it seems as though Donald Trump wants the backbone of the Indian economy. As it turns out, Donald Trump wants American companies to capture the 99 trillion rupee agricultural sector of India. But this is a danger zone for India. For those who don't know, Indian leaders, whether they were from BJP or Congress, our leaders have always had a consensus on protecting the Indian agricultural market from the foreign forces, even if foreign produce was cheaper than India.
भारत अपने किसानों के, पशुपालकों के और मछुआरे भाई बहनों के हितों के साथ कभी भी समझौता नहीं करेगा.
We as a government are committed to defend the interests of our farmers and our small producers. We are very determined on that.
So India imposes tariffs of 70 to 80% on US rice and 30 to 60% on dairy products from America. But if we open up our agricultural sector, it will destroy millions of livelihoods in India. Why? Because Indian agriculture employs 150 million people, which is practically half the population of the United States. And the US farmers have some extraordinary advantages to capture the Indian market. Look at this. While the average farm size in India is 0.74 hectares, in the US, the average farm size is 188 hectares. While each hectare in India employs labor of an entire family, in America, even 500-acre lands are easily cultivated using mechanized operations. Secondly, while American farmers have access to credit at 3 to 5% interest rates, and that too backed by extensive collateral systems, Indian farmers often borrow money from moneylenders at 15 to 30% interest. So because of this massive scale, capital and automation, American companies can practically produce and sell agricultural products at such dirt cheap prices that our farmers will start losing their livelihood. Look at this report from SBI. Milk in India is sold for about 50 rupees per litre. But according to SBI's research, if we open up our dairy sector to US today, prices could fall drastically. And this is because the US dairy industry is heavily subsidized. This SBI document says that their exporters can sell milk as cheap as 25 rupees a litre. Add transport and cold storage costs, and their landing price in India comes to just 32 rupees a litre. And if you compare this to our 50 rupees domestic price, that's a 36% gap. So if American produce arrives in India, India's milk price could fall by 15 to 25%. This means 15 to 25% discount for us the consumers, but it also means that the farmers of India will have to sell their milk at 15 to 25% less price. And as we all know, milk is a 3 to 5% margin business. So to match the American prices, Indian farmers will have to sell their milk at a loss. So without these protective tariffs, subsidized American agricultural products would flood the Indian market, they would drive millions of farmers into bankruptcy, and they would create mass unemployment that would destabilize the entire subcontinent. On top of that, India would become so dependent on American food imports that tomorrow, if America stops supplying food to India, we could see another version of the 1943 Bengal famine.
Bengal famine of 1943 was one of the worst tragedies in modern history. It claimed the lives of millions of people, leaving behind a legacy of pain and suffering that still resonates in India today.
So long story short, we cannot open up our agricultural market. But at the same time, because of our protectionist approach, Donald Trump is crippling our trade with tariffs. So the question is, what do we do? Well, as they say, necessity is the mother of all invention. But in this case, it's turning out to be the mother of awkward partnerships. And maybe, just maybe, this is a good time to partner with China. Now I know what you're thinking. Ganesh, China is invading our borders. China has been strangling our solar industry, and China is strangling India with geopolitical influence. So how can we even think about an India-China partnership? Well, here's the uncomfortable truth, guys. In geopolitics, there are no permanent friends or enemies, only permanent interests. So if America is willing to weaponize trade to break our backbone, then even the enemy that we distrust today may be a trade partner that we could rely on. And economics is screaming opportunity. Let me explain. If China had been a trusted partner, a very interesting symbiotic relationship could have emerged between India and China. And in 10 years, by any chance, if China stops being a cunning dragon, something magical could happen. Because China's remarkable economic transformation over 4 decades offers a textbook example of a successful industrial policy. In the 1980s and 1990s, we all know how China positioned itself as the world's low-cost manufacturing hub. For example, Mattel's Barbie dolls were made in Chinese factories for $1 per doll, and they were sold globally for $10. Nike sneakers were assembled in China for $25 and retailed for $100 worldwide. So when this price advantage was replicated across different industries, this strategy successfully lifted over 800 million people out of poverty, the largest poverty reduction in human history. However, economic development inevitably brings a good problem called wage inflation. It's good because your wages are increasing, but it's a problem because your margins start shrinking. Look at this. China's manufacturing labor costs went up from $0.79 per hour in 2005 to over $6 per hour in 2021. That's a 600% increase in labor costs. So the Barbie doll companies saw their margins shrink, Nike's factories started seeing less profits, and it got more and more difficult for Chinese factories to cope up because Vietnam, India and Bangladesh still had lower worker wages to compete with Chinese factories. But here's the brilliant part. When your labor costs quadruple, you can't keep making the same low margin products. And when making a basic t-shirt in Shanghai became as expensive as making it in developing countries like Mexico, China couldn't compete on cost anymore. So they did what any smart business does. They moved to high margin products. And BYD is the perfect example of this evolution. BYD started by making mobile and laptop batteries in the early 2000s, but today they have evolved to become the world's largest EV manufacturer. Now they are competing with Tesla. BYD is still the same company with the same founder, but instead of making batteries that cost less than $100, today they make cars that cost $200,000. This wasn't optional, it was survival because Chinese companies couldn't afford to keep making low-value products when their workers needed higher wages. But here's the trillion-dollar question. If not China, who's going to make all those t-shirts, toys and smartphones? Because even today, the global economy needs these products, right? Well, this is where we see the China Plus One transition, where industries are moving out of China to other Asian countries. While Foxconn moved from Shenzhen to India, Hasbro Toys plans to shift 60% of production from China to Vietnam, India and Mexico. Similarly, Zara-like companies have been investing in Turkey and Bangladesh. And Samsung closed their last smartphone factory in China in 2019 and moved its production to Vietnam and India. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, India and China have a massive opportunity for an alliance. Because China doesn't want the low-value manufacturing anymore, but India desperately needs it. This isn't competition, this is the perfect opportunity. In fact, this is what Xiaomi is doing right now. In the Xiaomi model, while they design phones in Beijing, they source components from both Chinese and Indian suppliers. And 99%, I repeat, 99% of Xiaomi devices sold in India are assembled in India only using contract manufacturers like BYD, DBG and Dixon. This gives India and China 3 major advantages. Instead of competing, the two economies actually fit together like a puzzle piece. China focuses on high margin industries and India absorbs low value but job rich industries. For example, Xiaomi designs in Beijing but assembles in India to create jobs. So both sides win. Secondly, we can have a cost plus scale edge in the global supply chain like nobody else. For example, BYD can do its R&D in China, but it could lower their production costs by assembling EV components in India, which can reduce prices and expand reach of BYD in India. And finally, due to better trade relations, as Indian workers get richer, they become consumers of Chinese high-tech products like Xiaomi phones and BYD cars. So together, India and China represent unprecedented economic potential. And think about it, the market size of both these countries is 1.4 billion from China plus 1.4 billion from India, which is 2.8 billion people or 34% of the entire world's population. Both India and China have 500 million and over 430 million middle class population. This isn't just about manufacturing relocation, it's about creating an alternative economy. So while the geopolitical tension often complicates this alliance between India and China, the economic logic remains absolutely compelling. And think about it, guys, an India-China partnership would not just benefit both nations, it would fundamentally reshape global manufacturing and create a new axis of economic power which is capable of competing with any existing bloc. And the reason why it's conducive for India and China to act now is because both India and China are being bullied by the US. The US has already imposed sanctions on tech giants like Huawei and SMIC, and the trade war tariffs could reduce Chinese exports to the US by $485 billion in the next 2 years. And there is a severe ban on AI chips and semiconductor equipments which is paralyzing China's tech growth. Similarly, US has imposed tariffs on India, and there is a Western climate pressure to abandon coal without adequate financing alternatives. And this could slow down India's growth. So this shared experience has created a mutual problem where both countries can build a world where no single power can dictate terms to everyone else. And with the BRICS alliance now being activated, there is a serious chance that something tangible might come out. So the $1 trillion question is, can we just ditch the US and go with China? After all, China is geographically closer, economically massive, and shares similar development challenges as India. So can we side with China and ditch America? No, no, no. Because here's the inescapable economic truth. India cannot escape its economic dependence on the United States. This dependence runs far deeper than most people realize. Look at the numbers. In 2000, the India-US trade totaled merely $20 billion. But by 2024, this figure exploded to $118 billion. And we generated a massive $45 billion trade surplus while trading with the US. This isn't mere commerce, it's an economic lifeline. Firstly, India's $200 billion IT sector depends overwhelmingly on American demand. 50% of India's IT exports flow directly to the US markets. And TCS, Infosys and Wipro, India's technology titans, derive their primary revenue from American clients. Similarly, consider your daily digital life. We use Gmail for communication, WhatsApp for messaging, PowerPoint for presentation, Android for mobile computing, and ChatGPT for practically everything. All of them are American platforms. So India's digital economy exists as a tree whose roots are planted firmly in American soil. Secondly, India styles itself as a pharmacy of the world, and America consumes 40% of our pharmaceutical exports. Not just that, even in textiles, chemicals and gems, America remains our primary market destination. Thirdly, we have a defense cooperation. From near zero defense cooperation in 2008, America now supplies 10% of India's military imports, and it is our third largest arms supplier after Russia and France. And this matters a lot because defense relationships create decade-long dependencies through maintenance, upgrades and training requirements. And last and most importantly, while America has been a little disgruntled, we cannot forget that China has betrayed us in ways that we cannot ever forgive.
Where one country, that is India, has gone out of her way to be friendly and cooperative with the Chinese government and people, and to plead their cause in the councils of the world, and then for the Chinese government to return evil for good and even go to the extent of committing aggression and invade our sacred land.
For those who don't know, in the 1950s, Prime Minister Nehru championed the phrase Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. He called Indians and Chinese as brothers. And the 1954 Panchsheel Agreement promised peaceful coexistence and mutual respect between India and China. And India even supported China's UN membership as a gesture of goodwill and trust. So Nehruji's vision was noble. He envisioned two ancient civilizations, both victims of colonialism, to rise together in solidarity. But while Nehruji spoke of brotherhood, China was secretly plotting against India. And on 20th of October 1962, China launched a coordinated military assault on India, which started the brutal Indo-China War of 1962. So thousands of our soldiers died, our economy started to dwindle, our growth slowed down in the 60s, and we had to beg for aid from US and UK. And this war crippled Nehruji's vision of rapid industrialization of our economy. But here's where the truth becomes uncomfortable. You know, on paper, India and China forming an alliance makes perfect economic economic sense. Together we are 2.8 billion people and a middle class that's larger than all European countries put together. Together we could reshape global manufacturing, challenge Western dominance and build an economic fortress like never before. But economics is only half the story. The other half is history. Because the last time India trusted China, we had to beg for aid just to survive. So yes, America may be a flawed partner. Its tariffs are harsh, its hypocrisy is real, and its intentions are often self-serving. But the US is a known devil, and we understand its rules, we understand its system, and we understand its limits. But China, on the other hand, remains an unknown angel, promising opportunity today, but with a history of betrayal that we cannot ignore. And that is India's great dilemma of the 21st century. Do we side with the known devil or gamble our future with the unknown angel? The answer perhaps is not about choosing one over the other, but about playing the game so well that India never has to beg, borrow, or break under the weight of anyone else's power. And that is my view on the India-China-US situation. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to check out InCred from the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.